Roar. Empires can rise like great mountains and fall into dust. But faith, when it's rooted deep, can survive it all. Long, long ago, far from our modern world, an entire people were taken from their homeland. It wasn't because their god was weak, but simply because history was turning a new page. From this captivity, courage was born. From this exile came incredible endurance. This is the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And in our next video, we'll dive into the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But to understand them, we must first begin where their journey truly started, how they came to Babylon. Jerusalem once stood as a city of promise. Its magnificent temple gleamed with meaning, and its streets carried songs of worship and memory. But over time, the people drifted. Warnings from prophets were ignored, justice weakened, and faith began to fracture. And then, from the east, came Babylon. This was an empire of towering walls, vast armies, and a disciplined cruelty, all led by the powerful king Nebuchadnezzar. Babylon didn't just conquer with weapons. It conquered with strategy. They crushed nations, absorbed cultures, and completely reshaped identities. Jerusalem fell. The temple was stripped of its sacred treasures. The people were marched eastward, far from home. Among these captives were several young men from noble families, intelligent, healthy, and full of promise. They were carefully selected, not to be enslaved, but to be transformed. Babylon trained them in its own language, its literature, and its worldview. They were even given new names, designed to overwrite their past and redirect their loyalty. Their names were Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their homeland was gone. Their future was completely uncertain. But their faith? Their faith traveled with them. Daniel was still young when he arrived in Babylon. He was young enough to grieve everything he had lost, but old enough to decide who he would become. Right from the very beginning, Daniel distinguished himself not by his strength or his ambition, but by his unwavering integrity. When he was offered the king's rich food and wine, Daniel hesitated. This food wasn't just a meal. It symbolized accepting Babylon's entire system, its gods, and its values. So Daniel chose restraint. He asked for permission to eat simple food and drink only water. A test was agreed upon. After just 10 days, Daniel and his companions appeared healthier and stronger than all the others. God was honoring their faithfulness. Years passed. Kings rose and fell, but Daniel remained. He interpreted dreams that terrified powerful rulers. He spoke truth without flattery. Through his wisdom and consistency, Daniel gained immense influence not by force, but by earning trust. Eventually, under a new ruler, King Darius, Daniel was elevated above all the other officials in the kingdom. His excellence made him a target. Those beneath him grew jealous and searched desperately for some kind of failure. They examined his conduct, his leadership, his decisions. But they found no corruption, no negligence, no weakness at all. So they decided to aim for his fate. They tricked the king into signing a decree. For 30 days, it would be illegal to pray to any god or man except for the king. The punishment for breaking this law? Death in a den of lions. Daniel knew the law had been signed. He didn't protest. He didn't hide, he didn't change a thing. He simply went home, opened his windows toward Jerusalem, knelt down and prayed, just as he had always done. He was arrested immediately. The king realized, far too late, that he had been manipulated. He spent the entire day trying to find a way to save Daniel, but the law of the Medes and Persians could not be undone. At sunset, Daniel was brought to the lion's den. The den was sealed with a heavy stone. That night the king couldn't sleep. But inside the den, Daniel was not alone. God sent an angel, and the lions were restrained. Their powerful jaws were shut. Morning finally came. The king ran to the den and called out in anguish, "Daniel, has your God been able to rescue you?" Daniel answered, his voice calm, alive, and completely unharmed. The stone was removed. Daniel was lifted out. Not a single scratch was found on him. Those who had accused him were brought to justice, and the truth was revealed. The king then made a proclamation declaring that Daniel's God was the living, enduring, and sovereign God. Daniel continued to prosper. But the greater victory here wasn't just survival. It was the story of a life that remained faithful, even when everything familiar had been stripped away. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and join us for part 2.